Yo, what's up, sports bettors? I got 3 picks for you in this video on Underdog Fantasy. Yesterday, I gave out this play. 2 out of 3 down. This is a pretty big entry for me. 2,000 to win 12,000. But back to the drawing board today, looking for some value on Underdog Fantasy. So again, this platform, if you're familiar with Prize Picks, it works in a very similar way. The main difference is on these 3-pick entries, right? On Prize Picks, any 3-pick entry you create, if we switch this to a different player prop, any 3-pick entry, you're getting a 5x payout, right? On Underdog Fantasy, it's slightly better. Any 3 picks you select, we can change this Jalen Brunson to an NHL player prop. It doesn't matter at all. Any 3 picks you select on Underdog Fantasy, overs, unders, whatever, you're always getting a 6x payout, right? So basically the strategy, right? The strategy for beating platforms like Underdog Fantasy, like Prize Picks, these are fixed payout platforms. They're not changing your payout based on you selecting over or under, is you want to find spots just like this where sportsbooks have one side heavily favored, right? So I've run through the math of Underdog Fantasy before, and basically to be profitable on Underdog Fantasy, right? On these 3-pick entries, you want to go with 3-pick entries on Underdog. To be profitable, all you have to do is win your player props over 55.1% of the time, right? So you got to be able to select your over-unders just like Curry, over or under 38.5 points plus rebounds. If you're selecting your props correctly 56% of the time, you're going to be profitable. And I'll include this spreadsheet in the description, right? So what Underdog Fantasy assumes is most people, they don't have much of an advantage. So what the sportsbook assumes, what Underdog Fantasy assumes, is most people can only get these correctly. They don't really have an advantage. They can only get these over-unders correctly closer to 50% of the time. So if you're only hitting 50% of your picks in 3-pick entries on Underdog, your ROI is going to be negative 25%. So this is the number you're gunning for, right? 55.1%. That's all you have to do. Underdog Fantasy, I mean, there's nothing complicated going on here. All they do is they give you a 6x payout for any 3-pick entry. So backing out the math, you need to win 55.1% of your player props to be profitable. So the tool I typically start out on to look for value on Underdog Fantasy is right here. It's called the Positive EV tool on OddsJam. And all this tool does, right, is it pulls in all these lines from sportsbooks. It's reading in tens of thousands of lines from Underdog Fantasy, all these baseball props, NBA props, NHL, tennis, everything. And it's just showing you spots where sportsbooks are saying one side is heavily favored, right? We know Underdog Fantasy, they're not changing our payouts based on us selecting over or under. So we want to find spots like this. Juan Soto, under 2.5 bases, the play in green, right? And also in bold. This is a play that looks great in an Underdog Fantasy entry because what you're going to notice is all the sportsbooks, right? All the data points in the market. I say this a lot, but you want to treat, as a sharp bettor, you treat every single sportsbook, right, as a data point telling you where the line should be set. And you're going to notice every single sportsbook. Caesars has Soto's under heavily favored. Bet365, another sportsbook, another data point. They have his under heavily favored. DraftKings, under heavily favored. Fliff, under heavily favored. Pinnacle, sharpest sportsbook in the world. They have the under heavily favored. So we have all these data points, all these sportsbooks posting odds are telling us, yo, the under for Juan Soto is a lot more likely than the over. So this is a great player prop to include in an Underdog Fantasy entry, right? You want to find spots where sportsbooks are saying the under is a lot more likely or the over is a lot more likely, but in this case, it's Soto's under. So I say this all the time. Sometimes, I'll have more NBA plays. Sometimes I'll have more MLB plays. I'm not betting on sports just to bet on the most popular player, I'm out here betting, trying to make money. So I follow the data and I follow value. If there's more value in the MLB, I'll have more player props and I'll be giving out more player props on the MLB. If there's more value on Prize Picks. So I gave out this play yesterday on Prize Picks for the free entry. I mean, it should cash, right? If Curry scores at least 1 point, this is a promo that Prize Picks is running. If Curry scores at least 1 point, this is going to cash. So long story short, sometimes there's more value on Prize Picks. Sometimes there's more value on Underdog Fantasy, right? This play I gave out yesterday, it was only available on Underdog Fantasy. If you go back to the video, this isn't where the lines were set on Prize Picks. You're going to notice the same thing for this Juan Soto prop. This play isn't available on Prize Picks, right? This is why you want to get multiple sportsbook accounts. This play's not on Prize Picks. The more sportsbooks you have, because all these books set lines independently, the more profitable bets you're going to have access to. So I also gave out a couple of plays on Fliff. So for example, you can see there's a lot of positive EV bets. So, OddsJam, it works for these fixed payout platforms, right? Platforms like Underdog that don't vary your payouts based on you selecting over or under, you can use OddsJam, but you can also use it for betting on regular sportsbooks. So you can see right here, I created a 3-leg parlay, over 10.5 runs in Angels Brewers, Yu Darvish under 5.5 Ks, Clevenger under 5.5 Ks. All these plays I'm just pulling from the positive EV tool. So right here, you can see we're getting Yu Darvish under 5.5 Ks at minus 120 on Fliff. Every other data point in the market has this around, minus 160 odds. So this is crazy value on Fliff. We're getting this at minus 120 when FanDuel's telling us this should be minus 158. All these other sports books are saying, no, the under should be a lot more favored. The under should be like minus 160. So getting this at minus 120 is pretty crazy value. So that's all OddsJam is doing, right? It's pulling in all these lines and just trying to show you those rare few betting opportunities on Underdog Fantasy that are actually profitable, where the sportsbooks have enough juice, they have the under or the over favored enough that you're winning that player prop over 55.1% of the time. So according to Pinnacle, right, I've explained this calculator in other videos, but this is the most important calculator in sports betting. It's called a NoVague odds calculator. And what it does is it takes a sportsbook's market and it tells you the win probability for your bet. Right? So according to Pinnacle's market, they have the under favored. So we know the under is going to be winning over 50% of the time. We know the under is the favored outcome. All the sportsbooks have the under favored, but we don't know, okay, what's the exact win probability for the under? So what you can do is you can use this NoVague odds calculator, and essentially because Pinnacle, sharpest bookmaker in the world, they have the under juiced all the way down to minus 173, right? They're saying this player prop is winning 59.31% of the time. If you could hit all your player props on Underdog 59.31% of the time, again, nothing complicated going on here. I'm literally just breaking down the math of their 6x payout. So if you're placing these 3-pick entries and you are winning all your player props 59.31% of the time, your ROI on Underdog would be crazy high, 25.2%. But of course, that's a little unrealistic. This is just one data point, right? So DraftKings, they have the under favored, and Bet365, they have the under favored, but not all the way to minus 173. So we want to consider all data points in the market. So Bet365, they have the under at minus 145, just like DraftKings. So if you put in Bet365's market, they're saying, no. The under is still the favored outcome. It's still more likely, right? Bet365, they still have the under as the favored outcome, just not as much as Pinnacle. I mean, Pinnacle has this under all the way down at minus 173. So if we put in Bet365's market, they're saying, no. This player prop's only winning 55.9% of the time. Now, it's still going to be profitable, right? But your ROI is going to be a little lower, 4.8%, as opposed to if you could win it like 59.31% of the time. So you got to remember, like, sportsbook odds reflect win probabilities. If a team is a 2-1 favorite, they're minus 200. Minus 200 means a 2-1 favorite, 66.67% to win, right? So if all the sportsbooks had this minus 200, that would mean a 2-1 favorite, right? That's what minus 200 means. Minus 200, 2-1 favorite. So that would be 66.67% win probability. Of course, that's unrealistic, but your ROI, if you could get player props where the sportsbooks have it minus 200 and you can get it in an Underdog 3-pick entry, your ROI would be like 77.8%. So pretty crazy high. So this is the first tool I use. I mean, there's nothing really magic going on here. All you do is you go here, right? You select the sports books you use, and whether you're looking at regular sports books, like you can see here, there's some plays on Bet Rivers, or you're looking at platforms like Prize Picks, it's just going to show you profitable plays, right? So Juan Soto, under 2.5 bases, and the reason, Underdog Fantasy is so exploitable is, again, this platform, they don't change your payouts based on you selecting over or under. So the strategy for beating them is pretty easy. You just find spots where sports books have one side heavily favored, and in this case, it's Soto's under. So that's the first player prop I went with. Then I flipped over to the fantasy screen. So this is a new tool on OddsJam where I get a lot of my plays for Prize Picks, Underdog, No House Advantage, Parlay Play, all these different platforms. Again, I highly recommend signing up for all these platforms, right? Prize Picks is the only one that has Curry 1+ point, right? They have this crazy promo. I mean, this is basically free, right? This is basically a guaranteed win. Curry to score at least 1 point. So more sports books, more promos, more profitable bets, all those good things. Sometimes there's more value on Underdog. I'll be giving out more, plays on Underdog Fantasy in a day. But long story short, you're going to see this Juan Soto play. All the sports books have the under heavily favored. So here's the win probability. So you may be like, oh, this win probability is a bit different than what we just saw. But this was just including Bet365, right? So what OddsJam does is it takes all the sports books, all their markets, all the win probabilities and kind of gives you an average, right? With certain sportsbooks weighted more. So some of the sharpest sportsbooks like Pinnacle, they're going to be weighted a bit higher than platforms like, let's say, Bet365. So all OddsJam is doing is figuring out the win probability according to sportsbook odds. Nothing complicated going on here. It's just taking sportsbook odds, seeing how much juice they have towards the under, calculating the win probability for your play. So because every sportsbook, they have Soto's under heavily favored, we know the under's winning over 50% of the time, but we need to make sure we're getting to that 55.1% number. So OddsJam reads in, it's looking at BetMGM, Caesars, DraftKings, Pinnacle, all the different sportsbooks in the market to make sure you're getting value. So the next play you can see is Nelson under 3.5 Ks, so I added this play. You can see FanDuel as well as some other sportsbooks have the under heavily favored. And then Patrice Bergeron under 3.5 shots on goal. Look at this. All the sportsbooks have his under heavily favored. Right? So nothing complicated. We got 2 MLB plays, 1, NHL play following the value. All the sportsbooks have his under heavily favored for Patrice Bergen. So this is a great player prop to include. It really is that simple. All you need to do is find 3 player props that are winning over 55.1% of the time. And what that really boils down to is you need to find 3 player props right out of the tens of thousands of lines on Underdog Fantasy. You only need 3 picks. So all you're looking for is 3 picks where sportsbooks have one side, either the under or the over, heavily favored. And in this case, it's 3 unders that I ended up going with. In my entry, I'll include my email in the description if you have any questions. But this is my entry. Soto under 2.5 bases, Nelson under 3.5 Ks, Patrice under 3.5 shots on goal. So hopefully this video was helpful. I try to give you guys profitable picks you can tail. As well as kind of explaining the math behind these platforms, kind of explaining the strategy, the logic, the reasoning. So hopefully these videos are helpful to you, and thanks so much for your time.